Sing, sweet nightingale, sing, sweet nightingale. Ah.
Calling for your telephone interview for the Disney College program. Is this still a good time for you?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Excellent. So, Eleni, we'll be together for just about the next 20 minutes.
Okay.
Just to set the stage for you, the first few questions that I'm going to ask you are really just to confirm some answers off your application to ensure we do have everything correct on our end.
All right.
And then we'll go ahead and we'll review some role guidelines. We'll talk about some of your experiences as well as those exciting roles you're interested in. And then we'll wrap everything up with any questions you have for me. Does that all sound good with you?
Yes, ma'am, it sounds perfect.
Excellent. Super duper.
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right. So, Eleni, we're going to go ahead and just review some Disney look guidelines. All of the roles in our parks and resorts, they do require you to wear one of our fabulous Disney costumes, and they do all comply with the Disney look and appearance guidelines. So I just want to ask you, are you familiar with and also receptive to the Disney look and appearance guidelines?
Oh, yes, 100%.
Okay, wonderful. And then just for costuming purposes, any tattoos, piercings, body modifications, ear gauges, or dermal piercings, which would be visible outside of a tank top or a sleeveless shirt or mid-thigh length shorts?
The only piercings I have are in my ears, and it's just the simple one piercing on each ear. I don't have any tattoos.
Excellent. Okay, and you can wear those lower piercings, so that's just fine.
Awesome.
And then also, too, additionally, some of our roles may require you to operate a company vehicle. Do you have a valid U.S. driver's license?
Yes, I do.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay, super. So I want to take a minute just to confirm your coast and season preference. So just want to go ahead, Eleni, and confirm that you're interested in Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Your season preference would be Spring Advantage, so January through August, followed by the spring season, January through May. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right. So I want to take a few minutes to, did you have a chance to review the arrival and departure dates when you applied for the program?
Yes, ma'am, I believe I did.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So I want to just take a minute and start talking a little bit about the college program. And I want to start with the living experience, one of our 3 components that really make this program exciting. So you could have anywhere from 1 to 7 roommates, and the bedrooms are either double or triple occupancy. So when you think about living with others and having the roommate experience in the past, how did you and your roommates really work closely together to create that harmonious living environment?
Okay, that's a great question. Since I'm a sophomore, I actually had a roommate last year, and that's different from my roommate this year. But before that, I hadn't really lived with a roommate. But my roommate and I actually hit it off really well last year and this year. They're both really good friends of mine, and one of the things that we made sure that we did to keep that harmonious living environment was just to communicate with one another and to be honest. We kind of had different schedules, especially the beginning of freshman year when we both were really unsure about college and what we were doing. But as long as we communicated like, hey, I'm going to be back later, just wanted to let you know, so if you're asleep, I'll try to be quiet, or I'm going to get up early for class today, I'll try to be quiet, I'm going to be going to the library, just so we didn't really get on each other's nerves, you know, so we didn't have any hostilities towards each other.
Definitely. All right. And then when you think about the college program as a whole, Eleni, what made you select the Disney College program as opposed to maybe some of those other internships or experiential learning opportunities that you saw out there?
Okay, Christy, well, that's an awesome question. I have loved Disney ever since I was little. I remember going to the parks for the first time and just being enraptured. I have been captivated by the Disney magic ever since I was a baby. The first movie I ever watched was a Disney movie, and I immediately, that magic that I felt my first time at Disney, I would love to be a part of, for the next generation, to continue that magic that Walt has instilled in everybody. And I think that Disney is such a special place, and that no other place, no other work environment has that same kind of feel. So.
Absolutely, definitely. So speaking of some of your experiences, you have quite a bit yourself. You've been a volunteer for a missions trip. You have some international Thespian Society founder and president experience, National Honor Society, even a trooper
that's a great question. I would say number one, positivity. I feel myself being more optimistic through these work experiences because, especially working at a water park where it's outdoors and you have no idea what's going to happen that day, you kind of have to roll with the punches. And so just being positive, making the most of my experiences, that would be number one. Also, I believe in teamwork. I believe that teamwork is one of my skills that has greatly improved since I've been working, and just meeting all kinds of different people and learning how to just adapt to their strengths and weaknesses and how to adapt your strengths and weaknesses to theirs. And I would also say just being kind, I'm a Christian and I believe that being the hands and feet of Jesus is what I'm ultimately called to do. So just to see someone else not just as, just a nuisance, but as a person with their own experiences and their own issues, and just treat them like you would treat someone else.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. All right. And then if you were to think about your time working in the water park, what would you say some of your main responsibilities were in this role?
The water park was a great place to work. One of my main responsibilities was I was one of the first original mermaids they hired. It's kind of funny to say it that way, but I kind of molded the role for everybody else that ended up being a mermaid. So I would say one of my responsibilities was just to show up on time, to just sell the part, like to maintain the character integrity of the character that I had created, and to, no matter what came my way, to just ultimately have the guests have the best time ever. My work experience there was more flexible, like my responsibilities were more flexible than some of the other departments because it was one of our first years doing in-park entertainment, but ultimately just selling the characters that I was a part of and trying to maintain the magic so I wouldn't be like going to get on my lunch break in my costume. I would change, I would make sure I looked nothing like the character that I was portraying, just to keep the guests wanting to come back and wanting to interact with park entertainment every time they came to the park.
Definitely, absolutely. And then when you think about your time too, as a lead counselor there at the camp, safety is a priority for us at Disney and our number one priority. So as a lead counselor, how did you ensure safety was a priority there at the camp for you, your fellow colleagues, and also all of the children that were there at the camp as well?
Yeah, so safety is so important, and I dealt with a lot of kindergartners, so that was even more so important. They're rambunctious but wonderful. I actually, every day, we would go out to the lake on the campus where we had the camp, and I would have to be in charge of making sure all the kids had proper floaties. If they brought floaties, we also had life vests at the lake, so I had to make sure that every child was properly buckled and secure in a life vest because the lake was very deep. And so I made sure that my counselors that were helping me sent them to me so I could make sure, because I believe that those kids were my responsibility and I did everything I could to help them have a safe, amazing time. I also put sunscreen on them from head to toe, made sure all their stuff was together so that, mom and dad wouldn't have to worry.
Definitely, absolutely. And then if you think about your experiences, was there ever a time you had to handle a difficult guest, a difficult customer, a difficult parent or child, and how did you handle that, Eleni, while still remaining very calm, courteous, and professional?
Yeah, definitely. In the water park, which I worked at this past summer, at Typhoon, Texas Water Park, I encountered lots of difficult guests, but not in a typical guest interaction, you would say. So as I was a character, I actually played a character called Harmony the Mermaid. She was cousins with Ariel. That's a side story. So a lot of kids, I was wearing a mermaid tail and I was a mermaid, but a lot of kids were like, mermaids aren't real. Like, you're not a real mermaid. And they would say that so loud so all the other kids would hear. And at first I was like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm a real mermaid. Mermaids are real. Don't you know that? And they'd be like, of course you're not real. And so that would escalate. I know, kids are so skeptical sometimes. It makes them great. So that would escalate sometimes to the point where I would be in the water and the kids would sometimes come up to me, start pulling on my mermaid tail. And how do you react to that, I was like, okay, first of all, sweetie, it's bad luck to touch a mermaid's tail. I can't believe you're doing that. I don't want you to get bad luck. And occasionally some of my handlers that were there to make sure I was okay would kind of encourage the difficult kids to, step aside. Maybe if you don't believe, don't ruin it for the other guests. Some difficult parents with the children, the difficulty with the parents was that they wouldn't do anything when their child was, attacking the mermaid. So I just remained very calm, and I made sure that they had an awesome guest experience, even if I wasn't a part of that. I was not about to, start yelling at a kid for ruining my costume. That's not what I'm about. I wanted to make sure they had the best guest experience at another attraction or another location in the park.
Definitely, absolutely. All right. So I want to talk about these exciting and experiences that you're interested in at Disney, and we're going to talk about as many as we can here. I did want to let you know we'll consider you for each and every one of them, whether low, moderate, or high intense interest. But we're going to get through as many as we can here in the next couple of minutes. So just with beginning, I see you have high interest in character performer, and you have experience there before as well. Our character performer roles do require you to attend one of our auditions, our regional auditions. Were you planning on attending one of those auditions?
Yes,
I know. Yes.
Oh,
Dallas?
sorry. The Dallas audition, yes, ma'am.
Yay! Okay, I'm so excited for
Me
you.
too. Thank you.
Let me just notate that real quick here.
All right.
Okay, just to let you know ahead of time too that if for some reason you hear from us regarding the college program before you hear back from the auditions that are taking place, don't hesitate to still accept the program. You can accept the program if you're given the role of attraction. You can accept the college program, accept attractions, and then if you become a character performer, we'll make all the changes for you on the back end. So there's no worries whatsoever there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. That was actually one of my questions I was going to ask you, so that's perfect.
Oh, good. Excellent. All right. Super. So just a couple of other roles, too, I want to talk about as well. Attractions, high interest there for you. And I know you can go into a character as an attractions cast member and play the theme or the part of the attraction you're working. So with attractions, you could be doing ride operations, our theater show performances, parking, and bringing the tram in, as well as main entrance operations. So when you think about the attractions role, what was very intriguing to you about this opportunity?
I'm not sure. I love everything about the attractions at Disney World, and everyone is so unique. And I so admire the Disney way. Like at every ride, like at Splash Mountain, the feel is completely different than, Tower of Terror or Rock and Roller Coaster or Space Mountain. And I just love the fact that the cast members that work at the attractions kind of make or break the attraction as a whole, if that makes sense. So I really would love to be a part of making the atmosphere of the attraction as believable and as amazing to guests as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. All right. And then I also want to go ahead and talk with you about a couple of other roles as well. With roles such as theater and quick service food and beverage, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable in a restaurant, kitchen type of environment.
Yes, of course.
Okay, super. And then also too, another role, costuming operations. This role you would be servicing, and your primary guest would be your fellow cast members. So you'd be helping them, whether it's laundering their costumes, getting them back on the shelves, helping them check them out daily, kind of like a merchandise location. And you could also be helping some of our performers dress and undress and get ready to go on stage for their show. So when you think about costuming ops, just wanted to ensure you'd be comfortable first and foremost with all of those responsibilities.
Yes, of course I am.
Okay, excellent. All right. And then also, too, you have some high interest in PhotoPass photographer. So what excites you about this opportunity?
Well, PhotoPass is one of my favorite parts of Disney. Just to, the PhotoPass pass that you get as a guest, and the magic that is added to your pictures. I would love to help make a child's day, make them look like they're holding Tinkerbell or Chip. Also, I've just met a bunch of amazing cast members at the PhotoPass stations, and sometimes they're severely underrated, actually, and they have the chance to make or break a guest experience, but they have such creative responsibilities, like different poses they can do to really make the guest experience great, and I feel like I would be great in that position. Plus, I love taking photos, and I feel like I'd be great in that one role.
Absolutely. And you're comfortable carrying some heavier equipment, some cameras around the park?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. All right. And then also too, with your interest in merchandise, our sales, our retail role, I just want to go ahead and ensure that you be comfortable with cash handling skills or learning those skills as well.
Yes, Christy, absolutely.
Wonderful. All right. And then also just a couple of other roles. I know lifeguard is on here. Just need to make sure that you're comfortable. I know you were a camp counselor, but just need to make sure you're comfortable and confident with your swimming skills, and also just comfortable around a busy pool environment with lots of children and adults.
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. All right. And then also, just want to go ahead and just a couple of other roles. Just want to ask you the boutique hostess slash pirate league. This role working with children, doing hair and makeup, and make them beautiful or make them into a pirate before they leave us. Are you comfortable doing hair and makeup and or learning those skills?
Yes, actually, for during my theater performance times, I've done theater since junior high. I've actually designed and done makeup and hair for countless productions and for my fellow cast members, so I'm very much comfortable and I'm willing to learn new things.
Yay! All right, excellent, super duper. And then also too, I wanted to go ahead and ask you, what excites you about doing the children's activities role?
Well, I believe I've learned a lot of skills about working with children, and just the unique perspective they have on the world is enough to want me to spend time with them and to just invest in them in a different way than normal people do in the parks and even in their family lives, I'm sure. It depends on where they come from. I would just love to excite them about Disney and engage with them.
Sure. And then the character attendant role that we have at Disney, how would you describe this role to somebody who might not know what a character attendant is?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say first and foremost, they are responsible for the safety of the character that they are attending. That's extremely important, especially if it's a fur character and sometimes their vision is compromised. I would also say they are responsible for maintaining the character integrity of the character, sometimes even more so than the character they are attending, because they have just an unexpected smorgasbord of people that come into the park every day with all sorts of questions and skepticisms. And so they also, on top of those two things that I previously mentioned, they are just responsible for keeping the lines moving in an orderly fashion, keeping people from, kicking or roughhousing with the characters, especially if they can't talk to defend themselves. That's just not a good situation. So character attendants are responsible for the safety of guests, the safety of characters. They are also responsible for just maintaining the Disney, the look and the feel of the park, be friendly, make guest stays as possible.
Certainly, absolutely, definitely. So once again, we'll go ahead and consider you for each and every role in which you've expressed low, moderate, or high interest at Disney. But when you think about these roles, and based on the descriptions and the role checklist and the roles we discussed today, Eleni, are you able to perform the essential functions of the roles with or without a reasonable accommodation?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, wonderful. So those are all the main questions I do have for you today. So, Eleni, I do want to go ahead and just take the next couple of minutes to share with you what will happen from here, so you're aware of the next steps in the process.
Okay.
So we are going to communicate with you either way, and we're going to do so on your dashboard, on the Disney Career Portal. And are you familiar with your dashboard?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. Oh, good, good. Stay friends with that dashboard. All right. So that little bell in the upper right-hand corner, that's where your new updates and notifications will come through. So just check that periodically.
Okay.
And then also the status of your dashboard, it's not going to change until a final decision is made. So don't worry if every day you come back and check your dashboard and it still says the same status. Not a worry at all. It just won't update until the final decisions are through.
Okay.
All right. And then also, speaking of hearing from us, you could hear from us regarding your status within the next 2 to 3 weeks. However, it may take up until the end of October as well. So just keep that time frame in the back of your mind when you're thinking about the college program. And then if you are accepted, Eleni, this is when you're going to get all of your information on how to accept or decline your offer, when
Okay.
to arrive, the role that you'll have, classes available to you, and then our contact information, because we do know questions come up between acceptance and arrival, so we do want to make sure we can answer those for you along the way. Does that all sound good with you?
Yes, sounds amazing. Thank you.
Oh, good. All right. I like when it sounds amazing. So with that being said,
actually, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First of all, depending on the role, I know it's flexible from role to role, but how much training would you say is involved before you actually start working in a position and through the DCP,
Yeah,
specifically?
great question. So, like you said, it does depend on the role, and that could have a, that could affect, the training time frame. But I will say that you are going to have some off-site training, and then you're going to have on-site training, and then you're going to be earning your years. So you'll get a little red ribbon, just so our guests also know that you're earning your years, and fellow cast members can be there to help you and assist you when needed. And then once everything's kind of complete and you're ready to go, you'll be off and running and kind of set free to make magic on your own as well. Of course, you'll have some wonderful teammates and cast members along the way, but there's a great extensive training that you'll go through, and it just depends on the role, like you said.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Sure.
Also, one more question, real
Yeah?
quick for you. I'm curious, if you were like applying for the DCP like I am, what role would be your top role and your top attraction or park? However you want to answer that question, I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. So, oh my. So I did do the college program before.
Okay.
That's how I started with the Disney company. There's so many exciting roles within the company. And I'm not sure which one I would rank above the other, but I would have to say that I probably would be very excited about an attractions role.
Yeah.
And really going into kind of character and giving some short spiels, long spiels, and being able to kind of step into a role each and every day that might not be my true self.
Yeah, that's
So I
awesome.
think that's kind of probably what would be intriguing to me. Is something that I would enjoy doing. As far as performing too, I've always just enjoyed and loved that as well. But I think attractions would be probably my number one choice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Eleni, you're so very welcome. It's my pleasure. And I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your Sunday, especially to chat with me, share your story, your personal story, and your Disney journey, so I could get to know you a little bit more. I do truly appreciate it. So thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. It was so nice to talk to you, Christy.
You are so welcome. It's my pleasure. I hope you have a magical rest of your Sunday and enjoy the upcoming week as well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.